Chapter 2. Winifred approached the knoll where she'd seen her grandfather's guard disappear on more than one occasion. She was about to dismount and take a look around when the growling of an angry animal spooked her horse once again. She had thought she'd scared off whatever lurked in the woods, but it seemed to be following her. The horse reared up and threw her to the ground, along with her crossbow and the basket of food. Scrambling to her feet, the cloak tangled around her legs, causing her to lose balance. Before she could grab the reins, the horse darted away and disappeared into the night. 2 yellow eyes glowed from the bushes. Out came a brown wolf with its head low and the fur at the scruff of its neck furrowed. With her eyes fastened to the animal, her fingers quickly secured a bolt from her pouch. In one motion, she grabbed her crossbow and pulled back the windlass, loading it. The wolf lunged at her. She raised her weapon and released the bolt. At the same time, a hand shot out from nowhere, pushing her to the side. The bolt missed its mark. A man stepped in front of her, quickly as the wolf barreled into his chest. "Down! Don't!" he commanded in a low voice. The stranger made eye contact with the animal for a mere second before the wolf turned and ran back into the thicket. Winifred was so surprised and shaken that she couldn't find the words to speak. The stranger turned and looked at her. In the moonlight, she recognized his face as the prisoner she'd helped set free from her grandfather's dungeon a year ago. Her heart beat faster. This was Lord Hugh de Bar, the wolf. Dark, silver-gray eyes interlocked with hers. His hand reached out and grabbed her crossbow. By the power of his grip, there was nothing she could do to stop him. His tall, solid body hovered over her, and his black hair glowed with a vibrant blue sheen in the light of the moon. The last time she'd seen him in the dungeon, he was broken, bruised and bleeding, and didn't look half as threatening as he did right now. He looked dangerous, but at the same time, incredibly handsome. His dark eyes interlocked with hers. With the intensity of his gaze, she felt as if he were looking into her very soul. "What are you doing here?" he growled, sounding similar to the growl of the wolf he'd just scared off. "I'm Lady Winifred of—" "I know who you are. That is not what I asked." "You know me?" She lowered her head, wondering if he also knew she was the one who helped him escape from the dungeon. If so, he didn't sound very grateful. Her grandfather could never find out about it, or he would punish her severely. That night, she'd worn a hooded cloak, hiding her identity when she set him and the wolf free from the dungeon. "How do you know me?" Daringly, she raised her chin, waiting for his response. "You are the one killing off the wolves," he said, holding her crossbow high in the air to make his point. "I don't know what you mean. I only hunt for food, or use my crossbow when I'm in danger." "You're working for your grandfather, aren't you? He told you to kill off any wolf you see. Don't lie, because I know it's the truth." He was right, but she wouldn't admit it. Her grandfather had been the one to insist she come hunting with his men, telling her to rid the woods of pesky wolves. Winifred had killed a few wolves in the past year, but only so her grandfather would keep allowing her to leave the castle and go with the hunting party. "Give me my crossbow," she said, grabbing for it. But he held it high over his head and far out of her reach. "You are an addle-pated young girl, without a bit of sense in your head to come into the woods alone at night." "I'm not afraid of you." She reached for her crossbow again, but this time his other hand shot out and grabbed her wrist to stop her. His eyes interlocked with hers in a dangerous stare. In the moonlight, she couldn't help notice the hunger within them. He looked as if he wanted to eat her. This time, she was scared. Lord de Bar bent toward her. At the same time, he dropped her bow to the ground, using both hands to pull her up against his chest. His face came close as he scolded her again. "You foolish, foolish girl! You don't know what you're doing." Before she could respond, his lips were locked with hers in a foreboding kiss. It was nothing like the kiss she'd shared with the castle guard to keep her secret. This man's kiss was powerful, and full of passion. It was also dangerous and filled with lust. His hands gripped her shoulders tightly, keeping her from moving. If she fought him, he'd snap her thin bones in his large hands as easily as breaking kindling for a fire. Fear coursed through her body. Oddly, she felt excited at the same time. Winifred was an adventurous soul. Anything off limits always intrigued her. Kissing a dangerous man in the dark forest without an escort present was certainly something she shouldn't be doing. This man, who was referred to as Wolf, was touching her. And they were all alone. His kiss sent a tingle spiraling through her body. This was a reaction she didn't understand. Never had she felt this way before in her life. She was wondering just what to do when he suddenly pulled away. "Damn!" he spat. "Don't you see how easy it would be for me to take you right now?" "Stay away from me," she warned, with a tremble to her voice. Stepping backward, she now realized just how foolish she'd been to come here all alone, and at night. With no horse and her weapon on the ground, there was no way of fleeing or fighting back if he should decide to do just what he suggested. Or worse yet, he could snap her neck and leave her for the wolves to eat. No one would ever know what happened. Her eyes shot over to her crossbow on the ground, thoughts of diving for it filling her head. But his hand came down on her arm again like the grip of death. "Why would I stay away from you?" he asked. "You are the Earl's granddaughter. You share the blood of the man I hate more than any of my enemies." "I didn't do anything to you," she protested. "What your grandfather did, you did as well." "Nay, it's not true." She shook her head. "I'm the one who saved you from the dungeon. Now, let me go." His grip loosened when he heard her words. He pulled his hand away as if he were burned, surprise showing on his face. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Are you saying you are the one who set me free that night?" "Not only you, but the wolf that was in the dungeon at the time as well." "Why would you risk your life to do that?" "What does it matter? What's done is done." She took the opportunity to dive for the crossbow and grabbed a bolt from her pouch in the process. Sliding it into place, she pulled back the windlass, aiming the tip right toward him. "You are a liar," he spat. "No one who risked their neck to save my life in the first place would be aiming their crossbow at me right now." "What do you want? Just leave me alone." He looked down and kicked at the basket, spilling the food and wine on the ground. "You are meeting someone. You're bringing them food in secret." Though her weapon was aimed right at him, his eyes left her and scanned the ground. "Tell me, who are you coming to see?" "It's none of your concern." She couldn't tell him even if she wanted to, because she truly had no idea. "If I were you, I'd leave. Any moment now you will be surrounded by soldiers." He chuckled softly. "I highly doubt that." Still, his eyes scanned the area. Then he focused on something in the distance, raising his nose and sniffing the air the way an animal would. "Your horse is behind that large oak tree. Get on it, and get the hell out of here before it's too late." "Too late? For what?" "If you have to ask, then you are even more naive than I thought." "Arnon!" he called out, and once again the wolf appeared from the thicket. She raised her bow, but his words stopped her. "If you even think of trying it, I'll order the wolf to attack. And if he somehow doesn't manage to kill you, then I will run my blade through your heart myself." He unsheathed his sword from the scabbard on his weapon belt, just to prove he wasn't jesting. It was time to leave. Winifred turned and ran, and she didn't stop until she found her horse just where he said it was. After hoisting herself into the saddle and preparing to leave, something caught her eye. A door, half hidden in the knoll. She swore she saw it in the moonbeams, but then, almost as if by magic, it disappeared. "Go!" the man bellowed, rattling her nerves. With her crossbow tucked under her arm, she rode like the devil in the dark, being more reckless than she'd ever been in her life. Wolf hunkered down and ran a hand over Arnon's head and spoke softly. "You did the right thing by letting her go," he assured him. "Lady Winifred wasn't to blame for what happened. She said she was the one to save us, though I'm not sure I believe her." Arnon whimpered and looked at the basket of food spilled on the ground. His mouth opened and his tongue shot out. No sense letting it go to waste. Wolf picked up a leg of mutton and threw it to his brother. He then stuck a sweetmeat between his teeth as he scooped up the remainder of the contents and shoved everything back into the basket. The flagon of wine was on a strap, so he slung it over his shoulder as he stood up and mounted his horse. "Let's get back to the castle and think things through, Arnon." Wolf headed away with his brother following in his wolf form, with the mutton leg between his teeth. If their senses hadn't been so overwhelmed, they might have realized they were being watched.